So it seems that I may have to start calling this week Streaming Week, because all three stories that I want to bring to you in video form all revolve around streaming and kind of its state and how we need to assess it during what I'm going to call a post-reset circumstance, because believe it or not, streaming hit the reset button. Here we go. So this time around, we're going to try to provide some in-depth analysis, or at least start to dive into that. We're going to look at the current state of the streaming industry itself and explore some of the key challenges that are being faced by all of these studios. And of course, some of the strategies that they are employing to get around those challenges, or at least make them less harmful to their bottom line, which doesn't seem like they've been able to do lately. Anyway, we're going to take a look at the impact of content spending. We're going to look at the employee layoffs that have just occurred. We're going to look at some of the other revenue streams that are being revived because, well, they're more reliable. So the streaming industry in its infancy, when it was a nascent entity, really was dominated by Netflix and eventually Hulu in the mix and so on and so forth. But right now, there are seismic shifts taking place because obviously the legacy media studios just decided that they all had to have their own walled garden streaming platforms, which again, I thought was a bad idea. And I'm going to still stand my ground on that one. But with the influx of all of these brand new streaming services, we had a need for more and more content to fill all of these things up, because in order to be a robust platform, it was thought that you had to have a ton of original content. And certainly that helps, especially if you're somebody like Netflix, who no longer has access to the legacy studios material, which they were kind of borrowing at a license price so they could have all of us watch it. It was a good system, yet we walked away from it. Anyway, every major streaming player has felt the impact of what it costs to get a streaming service started, and also to keep it operating, because that's not cheap either. And then all the costs that go along with producing content and all the people in the background, and then managing advertising, because hey, you need to have some of that, and so on and so forth. Now, the budgets for all of those things, incredibly overblown. Irresponsible, in fact, especially if you're an investor looking back on it with some hindsight. One of the key strategies right now that's being employed by the major streaming platforms is the consolidation of their content libraries. You're seeing that across the board, and I think the people that you would point to as the pioneers here would have been Warner Brothers Discovery, because guess what David Zaslav did right from the get-go? Got rid of things that never should have been made in the first place and stopped making things that, well, shouldn't be made at all. Now, this is obviously about many things. It was an effort to trim costs and to increase efficiency, obviously get rid of some redundancy. So the platforms themselves, all of them, have been reassessing their content acquisition strategies, which means, buying content from other people instead of producing it themselves. And they've been focusing on creating more exclusive content, more original programming that's just a little bit more thoughtful. Keep that in mind, because this shift has led to increased competition for top tier talent, and boy, have they been writing checks. But what's weird is their idea of what top tier talent looks like, and even some of those are going by the wayside. See you later, Ava DuVernay. But there are some wonderful creators out there that can make, write, produce, and, well, get to your screen some wonderful content, like I suggest the Russo brothers, which I would say that they're two swings at their private services with Netflix and others have actually proven to be, well, interesting. And in addition to content consolidation, streaming platforms are actually exploring other revenue streams to bolster their profitability, and boy, do they need to do that. And while subscription revenues do obviously remain the primary source of most of these platforms' income, they've introduced the idea of advertising, which I said all along was probably coming regardless. There was probably no way to deny that, especially over at Disney, when you looked at it and saw that their average half-hour show was only about 20 minutes long. Kind of a no-brainer. Now, this additional revenue coming in, this advertising resurgence, has really helped with the supplementary revenue stream. Platforms like Hulu and Peacock had already had a hybrid model since very early on. Peacock probably the most successful one of those, offering both ad-supported and ad-free subscription options, which means, well, you paid a little bit more money. This allows them to tap into the additional revenue streams while catering to their viewers' preferences, which is kind of a novel concept these days. Furthermore, content licensing is the revenue that they know. It's the one that they've known forever. Syndication deals, all of these things that, well, brought in the bucks. It was their bread and butter. So, of course, it's been renewed and people are like flocking to it like it's some undiscovered country. And while I thought that was an okay film, I will say this: licensing was always how you made your money. And in case you're not clear, licensing their content to generate additional revenue or to send it overseas to international markets, other streaming services, they gain more revenue and they don't incur the full costs of production. That makes sense. Kind of reminds me of the Disney deal that they had with Netflix before they decided to wall off their garden. This approach helps to maximize the monetization potential of the content libraries while minimizing their financial risks. And yet, despite all these cost-cutting measures right now, streaming costs continue to rise year over year. I would say they spiraled out of control. And if you look over at Disney, it was pretty clear that was the case. It's funny when you can say that you've, reduced substantial amount of content spend in the previous investor call and still have over $500 million worth of expense. Doesn't sound like you've cut very much at all. So with the demand for high quality content coupled with increased competition, that's driven up the cost of all the production. I would say that's one of the primary factors, but there are other costs in there as well. Licensing and marketing has also gone up substantially. In particular, digital ad spend is starting to become a problem. And this is an ongoing challenge, and it poses a significant hurdle going forward for streaming platforms that are striving to achieve some form of profitability. And of course, there's an industry-wide goal for all of these folks to make a profit by 2024. Boy, are they going to miss that window. Now, while the major players are weathering this storm because of their obvious huge cash reserves, and in Disney's case, these theme park things, smaller streaming services are actually facing some critical consequences. You look at something like Stars or AMC networks, and you're wondering if they're going to make it to the next level. So as the streaming landscape becomes increasingly saturated, and let's be fair, it's beyond saturated at this point. We've reached probably the apex and are now on the decline for the number of streaming services that we have, outside of obviously the fast services, which we've talked about before. These players have to find a way to innovate in ways that are noticeable. They have to differentiate themselves and attract a dedicated subscriber base, which again, I think you could pivot into if you're Stars or AMC networks, but I think it's going to take a lot of creativity. And if you look at Hollywood lately, there isn't a lot of that. Some smaller platforms have actually adopted a niche content strategy, and that caters to like a specific genre or underserved demographics, which is a lot of buzzwords. But I mean, to be fair, there are niches that you can definitely fall into. Others are exploring some partnerships and collaborations, which will obviously amplify their offerings. I would imagine you will see an aggregator talk a bunch of these smaller services into coming into one location and then doling them out for a reasonable fee. I think that is a smart strategy. The casualties of the streaming wars, however, are starting to become more apparent, with several small services already shutting down. Of course, we called one right when it was starting up in Quibi. And of course, some of these smaller services are being acquired by the larger players. And there are plenty of large players out there that are looking for smaller content houses and smaller streaming services. I mean, look at Amazon and Apple as, the primary buyers in that situation. And there are challenges that come along with, being acquired. I mean, we've seen a lot of consolidation in a lot of different fields, but when it comes to these streaming services, that's going to come with a lot of hurdles, because sometimes you don't have agreements to move some of your product somewhere else. It comes with ownership and licensing. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. So negotiating content deals and achieving financial sustainability are probably the most important things. At this point, it's more about survival. This is a do or die moment. There are many reports out there highlighting the need for a comprehensive examination of critical metrics and trends. And that's kind of what I'm going to be doing in the next 2 videos that we have coming out on this matter. Hopefully I can get them both out this week, or maybe one over the course of the next 3 weeks, who knows. But we have to take a look at these numbers just like everybody that's inside these studios is doing, because obviously they have to figure out a way to become profitable, or they're just going to go away. My argument has always been, when it comes to this matter, that there were far too many services. I think consolidation's probably the only outcome here, and I think we'll ultimately end up with maybe 4 or 5 major players. And everybody else will be also-rans. Still might get the occasional niche, like maybe a horror channel, but I don't know. Even those may be hard to operate and impossible to achieve profitability. Ultimately, there has been some good news for streaming. There really has. I'm not kidding. We've seen a massive increase in digital marketplace purchases specifically for entertainment, and that's going to be in our next video, so be on the lookout for that. But I have a question to ask you. What do you think? Do you think that the streaming services are in danger? Do you think there will be substantial consolidation? And do you think this will lead to higher quality content? Good gravy, I hope so. Anyway, thanks for checking out the video today. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you're here for the first time, please hit the subscribe button, turn on those bell notifications, because we do almost daily live streams on this channel in various time frames, so usually it fits for people all around the globe. And if you enjoyed the video, like I said, please hit that like button, as it really does help. And with that, be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, wash your hands, of course, because it's good hygiene. And until next time, bye.
Today, be sure you're subscribed and hit that for alerts.
Yay!
Of course, like and share all of the videos that you can, as it helps with the algorithm. Have a great day.